This week, Games Workshop have become mired in controversy after they decided to take hundreds of online sellers, merchants, vendors, artists, and content creators to court and basically sue the absolute shit out of them. And it's causing quite a stir in the community, as you can imagine, with a whole mix of reactions and emotions from Warhammer fans, most of which has resulted in a lot of deleted Reddit threads. But not only that, it has also resulted in entire stores being shut down, sellers panicking, angry threads, and a whole lot of very well-paid lawyers finally getting to buy that second home that they have always wanted. Sure glad that I left law, started YouTubing about toy soldiers. Sure hope my mom's proud. Now, this is a huge story in the Warhammer community right now, and it has caused a ton of controversy and anger. And not to be morbid, but this is also extremely interesting. Look, I've got a background in law, and there's a lot going on here to get to grips with. On the one side, we have Games Workshop, who are alleging that these hundreds of sellers, merchants, artists, and content creators have all misused Warhammer trademarks and are producing counterfeit goods and doing fraud. And as a result, Games Workshop are now demanding millions of dollars for each infringement in compensation. Yeah, millions. That's a big allegation and a big amount of money to demand. On the other side, however, we have artists, content creators, sellers, and potentially pretty dubious defendants claiming that Games Workshop are way overstepping the mark and using extremely shady legal tactics to shut down legitimate sellers in what amounts to an extortion scheme designed to coerce them out of thousands of dollars. So this is a huge mess and everybody is very confused, but let's try to unravel it, figure out what's happening, who's in the right, and pierce through a lot of misinformation that's going through the community right now. And if you do appreciate this type of content, let me know down below, or subscribe to the channel or my Patreon if you want to keep up with this saga, or even just get wargame and RPG reviews. Now, I must admit that when I first heard about this story, like most of the community at the minute, I was actually 100% on the side of Games Workshop because they are making a really fair argument here. Essentially, their contention is that there are a lot of counterfeit and fraudulent Warhammer products being sold online, and that is inarguable. You can see it for yourself. If you go onto Etsy, eBay, or places like AliExpress and Alibaba, you'll get ads for all sorts of Warhammer products and miniatures. But many of these don't come directly from Games Workshop, or are not actually associated with the company, or even worst of all, some are outright scams, designed to part wargamers and fans from their money, all for dubious or misleading goods, like when I tried to buy that Tamarin monkey and just got a little old man instead. And there is an entire shadow industry around Warhammer that can confuse customers and are just little more than scams. And Games Workshop are aware of this, so they hired a bunch of lawyers to go undercover and trawl through these various online marketplaces and find such goods and investigate these stores. And now, after such a supposed investigation, and Games Workshop have gathered together all those that they feel are selling fraudulent products or are infringing on their trademark terms. And to be honest, on the face of it, yeah, trying to make the internet a bit clearer, a bit safer for consumers makes a whole lot of sense and is totally reasonable. And that is where most of the Warhammer community have landed in their broad consensus now. However, then I started to look into the court case itself. I reviewed the allegations that are being made, I've read the documents and the evidence, because I wanted to see what Games Workshop are actually doing, how they're doing it, and who they're doing it to. And now, not to spoil the video or anything, but my mind has been completely changed and I have done a total 180. And again, please do subscribe. These sorts of videos take absolutely forever to research and write and prepare for you guys. So you might be wondering then how I find the time to do all this research and run a YouTube channel full time. Well, firstly, Wang Hao has been really useful about the house, But also, I've been working with today's sponsor, Odoo, because if you are embarking on a project or running a business or even building your own war game, come on, I know you've always wanted to, then you'll want to check out Odoo. Odoo is an all-in-one management software designed to meet all of your business needs, from accounting to sales to website creation to project management or even invoicing and marketing. And each of these apps are linked to one another. They're all automated, they're intuitive to use, and they're tailored to your location. So things like taxes, currencies, and rates are all automatically adjusted in the software, allowing you to comply with local requirements with ease and stay focused on what's important. Odoo helps you centralize and manage your work on a single platform and get a better overview of your performance, all while saving you time and money by simplifying your workflow and providing a single, affordable subscription for everything you'll ever need. It's really simple. You'll get instant access to all of Odoo's apps starting from only 19.90 euros a month. And even better, you can get your first Odoo application for free permanently with unlimited support right now by simply following the link in the description below, and then you can choose to upgrade if you want to join the 12 million users on the platform already and get access to all 45 apps. So check it out below, and thanks to Odoo for sponsoring today's video. Okay, so this court case then, let's get into it. Now, the law can be a little bit dry, so let's make it more fun. Huh? See? Fun. Clowns are fun and can't be taken seriously in a court of law nor sued. Haha, it's all a parody. Honk honk. Fun, right? They give me a nose. I'm not wearing the nose. Okay, so we all know Games Workshop on the one side who are alleging the infringement. I mean, they own Warhammer. We know who those guys are. But who are the people on the other side? Well, there's around 280 defendants against Games Workshop in this case, and they're all listed in the Florida court documents. Here. Because yes, this case has been filed in Florida, and this was the very first big red flag for me. I mean, why is this court case taking place in Florida? After all, Games Workshop are a British company based in the UK. And as we can see from this graph of the defendants here, the vast majority of these sellers and content creators and vendors are based in China, the UK, and Australia, not America. So why file the case in a US court and not like the UK or even China? Well, this is actually a massive deal, but put a pin in it for now because we're gonna come back to it. So, okay, 280 sellers being brought to court in Florida. So what are Games Workshop alleging specifically? Well, they're contending that the products these merchants and artists are selling on online stores like eBay, Etsy, and Alibaba are trademark infringing products. Games Workshop are arguing that some of the goods were fake or low quality or simply meant to trick consumers into thinking that they are official products. Furthermore, they're also arguing that the existence of these products is destroying the goodwill associated with Warhammer and confusing consumers. Okay, that sounds pretty fair, but is it true? I mean, you might assume so, but let's do something that I'm not sure if Games Workshop have done and actually look into the sellers that have been named in this court case, because we might just find that things are a little bit more complicated, like my sexuality after clown college. So firstly, yeah, there are a bunch of sellers here who probably should be, honestly. Some are like Dark Miniatures, who allegedly produce recasted miniatures, and if you're gonna do something like that, then you should probably expect Games Workshop to come after you. That's just likely the cost of doing business. Or some are like this store, who are selling Chaos jackets with the 8-pointed star on it. Now, the 8-pointed star is a symbol that appears a lot in Warhammer 40k, but Games Workshop don't actually own that trademark. They actually kind of stole that symbol themselves from Moorcock, so it's a bit rich of Games Workshop to sue somebody selling this symbol later on. And I would have actually defended this seller, but they haven't done themselves any favor. They've actually slapped so many Warhammer 40k logos onto every single image of the jacket on their store, and even had the audacity to stick the 40k logo onto the label of the jacket. It's indefensible. I think this is a fair cop, Gov. Clearly, this seller was trying to imply that this jacket is an official Warhammer product. And there's a lot of these, actually. A lot of sellers who are just straight up selling Warhammer clothing designed to look official. These stores? No, this is unacceptable. One store even had the audacity to call their shop Warhammer 40,000 shop. Yeah, this is a third-party store. These guys were playing with fire. I've got no sympathy for them at all. Honk honk. However, that isn't all of the sellers and artists. There's some who occupy a grayer space. Like, for example, this seller who makes Space Marine helmets for cosplayers. Like, yeah, I understand why they're on the list, but it feels a bit unfair. Does the existence of this product really hurt Games Workshop? I don't think so, actually. You'll probably see this worn by a mega fan at a convention, and it's not like Games Workshop are providing stuff like this. There's also this seller of blooded 3D print minis. Now, I actually have a bunch of these minis, not from this seller, but the actual files themselves, they're great miniatures. I really like those. The seller in this case, though, does say they're 3D printed miniatures, so, you know, they're pretty open about that. But they've also referred to the minis as a collection of Kill Team models, so that could definitely confuse someone for sure. They had maybe said somewhere that these are proxies, would have been way better. So this is all a little bit more of a gray area. But it gets worse from here, because there are also some sellers on this list that are frankly pretty shocking. For example, here we have one of the alleged fraudulent and infringing products. This is a 3D printed Citadel paint pot holder. This is one of the products that Games Workshop is claiming has dealt like what, 2 million in damage to them because of its existence? And for the life of me, I can't really say why, beyond the fact that the word Citadel is in the title of the product. But, I mean, to be fair to the seller, this holder is clearly designed to hold, specifically, a Citadel paint pot to stop it from spilling Nuln Oil everywhere, which, honestly, we could all use. Suing these guys seems a bit much. Maybe Games Workshop want the Nuln Oil to spill. Or we have this seller who is now being brought to court because they had the audacity to sell round adhesive magnets. I poured over this one. I actually couldn't figure out why this seller has even been targeted for legal action, but then I saw in the description of their product, they say that the magnets fit, quote, Warhammer base sizes. That's the only reference to Warhammer I could find on this one, so that's not a very strong case. There's another here that's just the standard Dungeons and Dragons style polyhedral dice, but it has Warhammer in the description of the store item, presumably so that it can be found on search engines. But that got them on the list. And then there's even some really big sellers caught in this too. For example, you've got Baron of Dice. They've been named as a defendant. And the reason is seemingly because they used the term Warhammer for their Ashen Wastelands battle mat. And you've probably heard of Baron of Dice. They are a huge, legitimate seller of wargaming products, and they sponsor YouTubers and content creators online, and they facilitate a lot of actual games of Warhammer. So the actual sellers caught up in this court case are all very different. There is a sliding scale here. It's not black and white, but all of them are being tarred by the same brush, facing the same punishments in the same court of law. So how are Games Workshop getting away with that? Well, that's where we come back to sunny Florida and the frankly pretty dark reason why this seemingly random jurisdiction is being used as the place of litigation. And that's because it's not random. See, Games Workshop are filing their suit in Florida specifically to take advantage of a legal loophole in Florida called Schedule A Defendants Scheme, aka the helpful acronym SAD. This scheme is pretty ingenious. It has allowed Games Workshop to group together hundreds of unrelated sellers together into a single case in what is called a sealed complaint. Now, the advantage of this scheme is that it allows an accuser to save money in court fees by just bringing a single action against a whole bunch of defendants all at once, rather than having to file the 280 or so cases individually. However, there is also another, arguably way more important advantage to Games Workshop with SAD. An advantage that is very controversial and arguably extremely abusive. See, an important element of SAD is that it takes place ex parte, or in non-lawyer, normal person speak, in the interest of only a single party to the filing, in this case, Games Workshop. How it works is that Games Workshop have made up a huge list of artists, stores, and vendors, Schedule A, and then alleged that those artists, stores, and vendors are engaged in some sort of trademark infringement or fraud. And so they have asked the court for an injunction injunction on those sellers to freeze those sellers' online stores, which, under SAD, the court has granted without the defendant being able to defend themselves or even know that the injunction is coming. And such an injunction is really bad for you if you run an online store wherever you are, because while you might be based in Australia or the UK, do you know who isn't? Etsy, eBay, Amazon, these online marketplaces that likely host your store. They are all in the US. And when the injunction is served to those online marketplaces from the court, they follow the court's orders without question and will simply freeze your store on their website. And having your store be frozen is really bad if you're a seller on one of these platforms, because firstly, it means you can't access your shop anymore, but it will also prevent you from accessing any cash that you currently have on the store, meaning that you lose access to your cash flow. So you can't pay employees, expenses, vendors, or at this stage, pretty importantly, lawyers. And because your store is essentially shut down, it also prevents you from continuing to sell any other products. Not only the alleged infringing material identified by the accuser in court, but also anything else you sell. Any unchallenged, non-infringing items that have nothing to do with a court case, you can't sell anything anymore. And remember, nothing has been proven in court yet. In fact, you probably haven't even heard about this injunction or legal proceedings. You don't know what the hell is going on. The first time you'll hear that you're being taken to court is when you discover that you can't access your shop online anymore. So you can't even prepare for this at all. You can't get together a rainy day fund or pay outstanding expenses in anticipation of a slow period. So if you're a seller, now you've lost access to your income, and you're also being told that you're gonna have to go to a court in Florida to get it opened again. And bear in mind, you're in the UK or Australia, so what the hell can you even do? Well, you have two options. Firstly, you can decide to fight the court case, but who knows how long that will take, how much money it will cost, and during which, all that time, your store, and perhaps your sole source of income, will be frozen. Or you could do what the accuser, what the alleger wants you to do, and that's settle the case outside of the court by simply giving them money to make them right. Because, oh yeah, the accuser, they will remove you from the court case if you just pay a certain amount of money to them. In this case, it has been reported that Games Workshop are asking between $2,000 and $10,000 in damages from defendants for them to drop the allegations. And bear in mind, these defendants are likely earning, what, a couple $100 from what they sell? I doubt that very many of them can afford to pay that. So ultimately, that is the goal of legal proceedings under SAD. Accusers typically just want to get the settlement and then make an example out of everybody else who doesn't play ball. Now, hold on. In theory, the judge of this court case is meant to be the arbitrator. They're meant to make sure that everything is fair. Games Workshop have even been required to post a bond of $10,000 per seller to cover potential damages if the court finds later on that they have overreached. And a lot of commenters are bringing that up as a way to justify Games Workshop's actions here, that it's somehow benevolent. However, under SAD, because an alleger can take so many different sellers to court all at once, in this case almost 300 people, they can also voluntarily decide to drop any seller who doesn't settle the case from the proceedings. That means that the alleger can strategically decide which parties stay on in the case and proceed to court. And that also means that they get to control what information reaches the court, which defendants ever get to speak to the judge, and also give the superficial appearance that the case is proceeding by pressuring settlements from defendants, or simply dismissing others from the case. If you want to read more on SAD and why it's very problematic, to put it nicely, Columbia Law Review has a great paper on this, and I've linked it in the description below. But regardless, after all those settlements and dismissals, any remaining sellers are left to go to court, and many of them will not appear in the courtroom, maybe because they can't afford to litigate, I mean, they did lose their income, or they never got the proper notice. Bear in mind, in the US, unlike the UK, you can be sent an email as proper notice. Boy, I sure hope that email didn't get put in your spam folder. Or what is most likely the case, it's involving defendants who are outside the US and can't get to Florida. Or like me, they don't feel bound to the US court proceedings. I'll be dead in the ground before I recognize the Commonwealth of Kentucky. or they're bankrupt, potentially due to the marketplace freeze. And of course, there's always the ones who just know they're guilty and would lose in court, so they don't show up. And so the alleger, in this case Games Workshop, can simply seek default judgments in court against any no-show sellers, which courts are always inclined to grant. Turns out, not showing up to your court case, not a great defense. And then to ease collection, what usually happens in these sad cases is that the court can order online marketplaces like eBay or Etsy to turn over any cash that was in the defendant's store when it was frozen at the beginning over to the accuser, in this case to Games Workshop, so they can get some of them dollar bills, y'all. So really, in a certain light, this entire scheme, it's more like legalized extortion. It's really designed to pressure defendants into settling a court case, and in my opinion, that's why Games Workshop lawyers have likely filed this in Florida to take advantage of this legal strategy, this loophole, this sad. And in my opinion, it's pretty abusive. As far as I'm concerned, if someone accuses you of something, you should have your day in court, and it should be onerous to do so, and it should be with a real judge, with a silly wig. This whole thing would have been far more equitable if these cases were filed in the UK, where Games Workshop lawyers would have had to actually make an argument and defend their position in front of a judge. Especially when there are sellers who clearly should not be included in these proceedings, like Magnet Guy. Why is he in here? There's lots of sellers that are simply using Warhammer as a descriptive term for their products in the description of their store page, not on the actual product, which means they should arguably fall under descriptive fair use, because how else do you describe, for example, in Baron of Dice's case, a battle mat for Warhammer without ever using the word Warhammer? This legal action is bad for all of us, because it's bad for consumers if store pages cannot describe their battle mats or magnets or whatever with the word Warhammer, because consumers need to be able to tell if a product is appropriate for or compatible with Warhammer games. I mean, after all, isn't this the Warhammer hobby? Isn't that what Games Workshop always say? Isn't this what they want? Well, no, they want it both ways. They want to control it all, which is one of my big problems with the term Warhammer hobby. I get called a lot of names online, and I can't imagine why, because of my stance on this topic, but honestly, I've never understood the hostility to my position on this. Calling our collective wargame hobby the Warhammer hobby instead gives a single corporation control over our hobby and linguistic space. It means that they can decide what we can say, how we can describe things. It shuts out other games from hobby spaces, and it also puts small sellers online, who often are competing with Games Workshop, into the impossible position of having to market their wares to a Warhammer community without ever accidentally falling afoul of extreme Games Workshop litigation. A very difficult task, it seems, because many of them have fallen afoul of it today. I think we need to all get more comfortable with opening up the word Warhammer. It either needs to be genericized, or we need to start calling our hobby something else. Warhammer is not that niche anymore. Games Workshop aren't a mom and pop store. They are a billion-dollar corporation with a global reach and a lot of very litigious lawyers. That's why I'm dressed as a clown. So we need to hold them accountable when they wield the law like a sword, and we have to judge their actions based on their stated goal. So let's assess then, is Games Workshop's behavior in this case proportional to the intended objective of reducing confusion in the marketplace by shutting down third-party sellers and artists? Well, in the case of some of the sellers here, like the merchants producing AI-generated t-shirt designs with Space Marines on them, yeah, actually, I think taking them to court is totally proportional. But taking down sellers who use Warhammer as an SEO term for search results, or in the description of their products to describe them as compatible with Warhammer games, no, I don't think so. I think that is going way too far. I gotta say, the more I looked into this case, the more it has felt like a massive fishing expedition, taking advantage of an abusive legal loophole to confuse and intimidate small sellers who often can't afford lawyers, to pressure them into settling for thousands of dollars with a major corporation who frankly are kind of racking in the cash and sort of taking advantage of that. At least that's just my opinion as a clown. Honk honk. Ugh. Horrible. No, I don't give legal advice on this channel. After all, I am a clown and nothing that I am saying should be taken seriously. However, if it were me, and if I, like many of the people named in this case, lived in the UK, I'd say to any correspondents, go suck a lemon, sue me in a UK court. Because I suspect the Games Workshop won't ever pursue these cases in the UK courts because I don't think they'd get anywhere. You know, unless you were doing the Space Marine AI t-shirt. There's some in there that are pretty egregious. I just cut my losses if I was those guys. So yeah, counterfeiters, bad. But abusing the law, also bad. But I'll continue to follow this, so subscribe to the channel. If you really appreciate these very long and expansive deep dives that take a really long time to research and write and also put on all the clown makeup, please support me on Patreon so I don't have to rely on advertising and clickbait and can make more content like this. I just love dressing up as a clown. You'll also get bonus videos, reviews of war games, live streams, and a free game. And thanks to my patrons, especially CryptoKev, they make this all possible. And I'll catch y'all next time. Bye-bye.